Why now? That's what everyone is trying to figure out. Can you enlighten us on this point?
I mean, my guess is as good as you guys, but I will say Marco Rubio came out today, and this was something that had
Yeah.
been speculated and said that, well, the Israelis were going to strike Iran either way. And then we thought that our troops would be at risk. So we just decided to go ahead and join in
We
the
have
fight
it,
with them to
Krystal.
start
Let's
with.
play it, and then I'll let you hash it out here. Here it is.
The second question that's been asked is, why now? Well, there's two reasons why now. The first is it was abundantly clear that if Iran came under attack by anyone, the United States or Israel or anyone, they were going to respond and respond against the United States. The orders had been delegated down to the field commanders. It was automatic, and in fact, it bared to be true because, in fact, within an hour of the initial attack on the leadership compound, the missile forces in the south and in the north, for that matter, had already been activated to launch. In fact, those had already been pre-positioned. The third is the assessment that was made that if we stood and waited for that attack to come first before we hit them, we would suffer much higher casualties. And so the president made the very wise decision. We knew that there was going to be an Israeli action. We knew that that would precipitate an attack against American forces. And we knew that if we didn't preemptively go after them before they launched those attacks, we would suffer higher casualties and perhaps even higher those killed. And then we would all be here answering questions about why we knew that and didn't act.
Okay, here's the thing. There are reports that I think it was in a major briefing, that there was no imminent threat at all. And
Right.
so
From the
who's right
Iranians.
here is, yes, from the Iranians.
Well, and let me just say, I mean, if we take this at face value from Rubio, and I was hearing, rumblings from various administration, people connected to the administration, if you take this at face value, this is humiliating. Like, this is him acknowledging that we don't have sovereignty, that Israel pulled us into war. But I also think it's kind of BS because it pretends that we have no say, that, oh, well, Israel's going to do this. There's nothing we can do about that. That is insane. And that's where think you have to look at this, and from a couple of perspectives. I mean, we are in the middle of a massive scandal in terms of the Epstein files, and the president is directly implicated. And we have seen the direct connections between Epstein and the Israelis and the surveillance equipment that was installed in one of his apartments. And I do not think it's crazy, given how this president has behaved, to say, well, what is it that he's so worried about that is contained in these files? And you'd have to assume that the Israelis and potentially other actors around the world would know what it was that he was so worried about. So I think you have to factor that in as one possibility. The other thing, again, with regard to the Epstein files, is if you read those emails, you see that the rich and the powerful, they don't view war the way that we do. Normal people look at war and death and chaos and they say, this is horrible. Look at this human tragedy. Epstein, when he's talking to his rich associates, he says, look at this business opportunity. Look at this chance for us to consolidate more wealth, more power, etc. And so you have to understand, these people do not see the world the way that we do. They see this as an opportunity for them to enrich and strengthen themselves. And one last final point here that I think, bears in mind. Look, Trump is an idiot and he's a TV personality, right? All he understands is show and ego. He just had this thing in Venezuela that he sees as this great success. And I think he tricked himself into believing that he could do something equally spectacular in Iran, and this would bolster his legacy, and he would prove all the naysayers wrong. And these military generals, they don't know what they're talking about. And I think he, he was high on his own supply there after the Venezuela action as well.
And then we have this, Marc Caputo. This is from Bernie Sanders. How long ago was this? Was over the weekend. Trump said that we would attack Iran because we can't allow it to have a nuclear weapon. Really? This is the same president who in June said Iran's nuclear facilities have been obliterated. Vietnam, Iraq, Iran, another lie, another war. Mark, he did say that it had been obliterated, and now they're saying, well, we can't allow them to have it because they're enriching uranium, et cetera.
Yeah, it's among the many messaging problems, charitably speaking, that Trump and the administration have had. So on losing track of time now, on Saturday, the administration had a background briefing with three senior administration officials. And this was one of the things I was proactively, or I guess all of it was proactive because I didn't take questions, addressed by one of the administration officials. They're saying, well, yes, it was obliterated, but then they started to reconstitute it. And they went through a number of things concerning Iran's possession and manufacture of centrifuges, something called IR-6, and the allegation that uranium they sought to be enriched was 5 times the amount needed for a civilian program. And they ticked through a whole bunch of other things. I don't know if you want me to bore you with it. What you came across there is they sort of had multi-pronged reasoning behind going to war, behind authorizing the strike. They just couldn't find agreement, and each side is saying the other conducted the negotiations in bad faith. On the uranium enrichment and the nuclear program, the United States had this quasi-preemptive doctrine that you guys just went over. It's still not really clear just what the U.S. position is. And then in addition to that, it looks like there was a target of opportunity thing where Trump frequently sort of moves sort of the chess pieces on the board, or some would say checkers, to take advantage of a situation that maximizes his strengths and minimizes weaknesses. And so there's undoubtedly a target of opportunity thing here that sort of precipitated them doing that a little sooner than perhaps they had intended. Because generally speaking, when an administration goes to war or does a big thing like this, they do a better job in sort of laying the predicate for this. And instead, it was sort of the military action and then the predicate. And now it's sort of all being figured out in real time. Matt Walsh, the conservative podcaster, host, radio host, whatever, commentator, he had a kind of a really sharp and incisive post on Twitter or X, where he criticized the inconsistencies in the administration's messaging. It prompted Caroline Leavitt, the press secretary of the White House, actually to respond and say, no, the president's been clear. And I'll let folks judge that for themselves.
Yeah. Yeah, Sam, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I mean, a predicate after the fact is not actually a predicate.
It's not a thing.
A and B.
That's like the proactive preemption, right?
Exactly.
Yeah,
it's like,
yeah,
but
I got you.
The idea that Marco Rubio is attempting to sell the notion that Israel was going to do this, we have no control over Israel, and simply as a result, we would have been attacked, is absurd. It is just laughable on its face. It's absurd. And what's even more shocking is that they don't seem to even have a single predicate that they have all agreed on. Like,
Right.
During Iraq, there was a lot of different parties that had various reasons as to why they wanted to attack and invade and occupy Iraq. But they could at least got together and agreed upon a fallacy about weapons of mass destruction, as we were told at the time by Paul Wolfowitz. And there doesn't seem to have been any communication amongst any of the principals associated with the government over this. And it's completely befuddling, aside from the fact that it's illegal and it's not going to end up, I think there's two outcomes. One is essentially what the outcome is now, and much worse. That's basically it. There doesn't seem to be a third option, I think, that is going to come out of this. And so it's shocking. It's a shocking level of incompetence on top of all the other horrible things about it.
Yeah. We're just talking about the fact that the administration didn't even respect us enough to have a consistent lie about why we got dragged into this war. And that, those of us who lived through the Iraq war lies and buildup are never thought that I would long for the days when they at least respected us enough to make a case to Congress and go to the UN, et cetera, when they're building their war case based on lies. But I actually think it is worth pausing and thinking about why that is, because the truth of the matter is, this administration doesn't believe in democracy, clearly, and they don't think that we live in a democracy. They don't think it matters that only, let's say, 20 to 30% of the American public were in support of this war. They have contempt for the idea that they need public support whatsoever. This president only understands really sort of threats and mob boss tactics. And he believes that through his ICE budget and his secret police here and all of the various mechanisms he uses to stifle dissent, and through whatever plans he has to rig the next elections, and through the massive defense budget that he wants to use to project power abroad, he believes he can use brute force to do whatever he wants. And so it's not an accident that there was no case built, that we heard we continue to hear 10 separate different reasons for why we're doing this whatsoever. It's because they don't think that there is going to be any sort of a public check that matters to them. They don't care, and they don't think that it matters. Now, I think they're wrong about that, but that is the assumption that they're operating under, because they have fundamentally contempt for the American people and contempt for democracy.
Jasper, when we spoke this morning, and we heard from Hegseth and we've heard from Marco Rubio, and I still don't. Marco Rubio talked about the objectives, but I'm still not sure that we have a clear understanding of what's going on. And I don't want to quote you wrong, but you said we'll never understand that. You said our point is right now the objective is to do what?
Well, I don't know. I feel like I have a pretty good understanding at this point. I mean, there's just been unbelievable inertia, in the direction of this regime change war on Iran for decades now. There's also been like a sort of steady degradation of the obligation to get congressional approval for military action. I mean, obviously, long before Trump, we were doing drone wars all over the world without consulting Congress. Now we have just a completely belligerent administration. Like Krystal said, they have no respect whatsoever for the American people. The one thing I'm not clear on is why is Trump so beholden to Netanyahu at this moment? Because what Rubio just said was, we had to, I mean, you probably just covered this, but what he said is we had to preemptively strike Iran because we knew that Israel was going to strike Iran and then Iran would retaliate against the US. So we had to beat them to that, which, begs the obvious question, which is why didn't you stop Israel and, cut off that whole chain reaction before it even starts? And, Netanyahu has wanted to do this for 40 years. I mean, he is literally fulfilling his lifelong dream right now. That cannot be overstated. And him and, the blob in DC and just the various warmongers in his administration all, came together and made it happen. I don't know exactly what changed right now that pushed Trump over the edge, but my point just being there were a lot of forces working in this direction, and it just something finally blew and it happened.
And
Sam, before you jump in, can I ask a question before you jump in, please? So let's answer that question then. Why didn't they just stop Israel?
Yeah, I honestly don't know. I mean, what's weird is that Trump has shown an ability to rein in Netanyahu in the past. In fact, more than his predecessor, certainly. He actually stopped Trump from formally annexing the West Bank in 2020 because it would have jeopardized the Abraham Accords. He got to an ostensible ceasefire in Gaza that Biden couldn't.
We got him to stop bombing in Syria.
Yeah, exactly. He has shown an ability to stand up to Netanyahu, and obviously he's been nominally against these messy wars in the Middle East for a long time now. So I honestly don't know why he didn't just put his foot down this.
Go ahead, Sam. You have the floor.
Well, there were two things. One is I think that if you take the theory that there are multiple different reasons for attacking Iran that come from different quarters, whether it's Lindsey Graham or Rubio or Netanyahu or perhaps some other Gulf states, I think the window to do this is probably shorter in their minds than in ours, in the sense that it's increasingly looking like the Democrats are going to take the House. And it's increasingly looking like there's an opportunity for the Democrats to take the Senate. And if that's the case, the idea of Trump being in office, 3 or 4 months after inaugurations in January of 2027 becomes increasingly hard to imagine. And so if there's an opportunity for this administration to do this, now would be the time, only because they didn't do it 6 months ago. And as far as what motivated Trump, I think one answer that always seems to make sense to me is that somewhere there was an opportunity for him to make money. And I don't know if that was a function of there are some Gulf states that want this to happen as well don't necessarily want
Well,
responsibility.
they don't want it anymore, man.
Well-
They're getting bombed, you know.
Well,
so.
I mean, they're getting bombed, but you know, they may not want responsibility. They may not want responsibility for it, and in the same way that Rubio is happy to blame Israel for all of this happening, they would be happy too. But again, that's pure speculation. But
Well, actually, your speculation is not that wrong. Now, the Washington Post wrote a story saying that the king of Saudi Arabia, or the crown, I don't know, what is MBS anyway?
Crown Prince.
Is he technically the crown prince? Okay, the de facto ruler, that he had an extensive lobbying campaign. That never checked out with my reporting, but from my sources in the White House, they tell me that MBS, MBZ, all these guys, to Sam's point, let it be known that while publicly they were against bombing, privately they didn't have much of a problem with it. You know, they've always disliked the Iranian regime and vice versa, and so there was a certain attraction to this. But this could be an FAFO kind of situation where they realize, like, oh man, you know.
Yeah, well, I think it's also important to keep in mind the overall timeline. So since the quote unquote 12-day war, it's not like we were just like, all right, Iran, go do your thing. They've been trying to foment a regime change from inside. I mean, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, the way he originally came to wealth and power was basically by attacking, alongside George Soros, actually, the currency of the UK. And that's what he knows how to do. And he's out there bragging about all of the economic difficulty that he was creating in Iran, which did trigger an Iranian currency collapse, which was part of what helped to spark the mass protests. And then, you know, they were, you have various indications that we may have been a little bit more than hands off in terms of, encouraging those protests from the inside. And when that failed to succeed, you know, you have, Trump with the pressure of Netanyahu. You have Trump with pressure from within his own administration. You, of course, have some major donors, including Miriam Adelson, who not only funded his last campaign, but also promised, hey, if you want to go for that third term, I got I think she said $250 million waiting for you. And I think you add to that the sort of fevered climate after Venezuela, where I think it's going to be a disaster long term. They see it as this great, incredible victory. So Trump, you have to think about his mindset. He's got all these tweets from the past about how Obama's going to start an Iran war in order to rescue his approval rating. He thinks that wars will be good for his popularity. He thinks that they will create a rally around the flag effect and certainly distract from the, negative economic news, from the scandals contained in the Epstein files, and the fact that his political coalition is falling apart. So I think that's part of the calculation for why now. Remember, the Israelis, Netanyahu in particular, constantly working on him, flying to DC, constantly working on him. It only takes him saying yes once for us to end up in this situation.
And I think
I love to put stuff up just real quick. Sorry, Jasper. I love to put stuff up because what Krystal said. This is Trump.
Our president will start a war with Iran because he has absolutely no ability to negotiate. He's weak and he's ineffective. So the only way he figures that he's going to get reelected, and as sure as you're sitting there, is to start a war with Iran. Now, I'm more militant and more militaristic than the president. I believe in strength. But to start a war in order to get elected, and I believe that's going to happen.
I mean, people like to say that the last person in Trump's ear can radically shift what he thinks. And I think that in this case, with an issue that he's been talking about for a very long time, being against these forever wars in the Middle East, it should be more difficult to do that. My sense is that on some level, Netanyahu and Rubio and all these people were able to sort of shift the whole narrative away from forever wars in the Middle East and to you are the conqueror of dictators. You took out Maduro. You will take out the Ayatollah. Maybe you'll take out
Cuba's next.
Yeah, I was just going to say the communist regime in Cuba. I think that is a sort of new hat that he's trying on, and he's like, I kind of like this actually. My legacy will be I took out all these evil dictators, and his thinking does not go too far beyond the narrative. And so for all the concerns that he ostensibly had before about what comes next, I think that, this is a sort of new shiny narrative, so to speak, that is working for him.
Yeah, I'm less with you on the Rubio part. Don't get me wrong. Rubio has no problem and made the case, from what I understand, supported the case when asked for war with Iran. But if Rubio really had his druthers here, the United States probably would not have done Iran, and to Krystal's point, gone straight to Cuba. That's more of sort of an immediate interest for him. Now, yeah, he's the Secretary of State, but he's still from Miami, and it's sort of much more of a concern. I also have gotten the feeling over the months that Trump has been a little more eager to be more confrontational with Iran than a lot of his advisors. So this has been something that's just sort of gripped his mind. I do agree that a lot of the evidence indicates that Netanyahu's sort of pressure campaign intensified, and amid that intensification, Trump got more interested in doing this. So I think it's probably also fair to assume that Netanyahu had a major role in either talking him into it or telling him that his instincts and what he wanted to do was the right thing. And here we are.
And we should note the buildup to this has been going on for months, if not, at least a couple of months. I mean, there's been reports of both warships and aircraft positioning. So this is, there doesn't seem to be a particular catalyst per se, but it's certainly been something that's been in the works for months and months. So I think that's important to keep in mind.
Thanks so much for watching, everybody. Your support means the world to us. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe so you never miss a show. We're live every weekday at 10 a.m. and 5 p.m. Eastern Time, with new clips dropping at 2 p. and 8 p. And if you want even more Don Lemon Show content, join the Lemon community. Members get exclusive posts, behind-the-scenes videos, and live chats just for you. So hit the join button or visit our channel page to sign up. Thanks again for all your love and your support, and I'll see you next time.